some of the most important minds in AI ethics in the world right now. I'm very happy to introduce to you, even via video, my colleagues and friends from the UK. There is Mr. Richard Foster-Fletcher, who is the founder and chair of Morality and Knowledge in Artificial Intelligence in the UK, which is one of the largest agencies for the development and establishment of ethical AI, and at the same time it is a global community with members from all across the globe. It is very active in the assessment of deep tech systems. Then I'm very happy to introduce to you my very good friend and colleague Marisa Zalabak, who is a chair for AI ethics education for a number of IEEE initiatives, the chair for global methodologies for Planet Positive 2030, which is an initiative which is done by IEEE in collaboration with Stanford Wood. And Marisa is an educational psychologist with quite a long track record and a lot of interesting stuff to share about soft skills in deep tech and technology assessment. And then last but not least, Professor Melodena Stevens, who comes from quite an extensive technological background. She used to work at Tata, which is something that we have in common with the telecommunications industry. She has a lot of publications on AI governance and AI ethics, and she's just simply one of the best people in the world when it comes to AI governance. She works with the government of Dubai on Cityverse and smart cities projects. I'm very happy to welcome my wonderful colleagues to the stage. And I'm sorry about the slight delay, my friends. So let's start with something positive, because the title of this panel is the positive sides and the perils of deep tech and AI ethics. Let's begin with the positive sides, and let's go across the virtual room and perhaps start with some of the ladies, perhaps start with Melodena. What are the positive sides that we are able to see from the projects we have experienced thus far with regard to the applications of artificial intelligence in environment, in biotech, in business? What do you think?
Okay, so AI definitely has tremendous potential to do good. So that's one of the things, which is why I think the uptake in AI is so historically so fast. And the example I actually want to give is from the medical industry. So if we look at the time from drug discovery to regulation, it normally would take about 10 to 15 years, right? And half that time was actually drug discovery. And this is because we're looking at 10 raised to the power of 60 molecules. So imagine someone in the lab trying to figure out which drug can actually treat which disease. It's a very long, cumbersome process. And then you add the cost to this entire thing. So half the time for drug discovery, and not even 1 out of 10 perhaps shortlisted drugs will make it to the first level of, the preclinical trials. So what AI has been able to do is actually reduce that time so fundamentally. In fact, if you know exactly what disease and you have some samples of some drugs, it can reduce it up to 2 months. In some cases, even maybe in a year, if you're looking at a wider number of molecules. So it's increased the amount of, reduce the time of drug discovery. It's reduced costs by 20 to 40%, which is phenomenal. And then right now we're at this point where we might actually have more drugs that can actually even treat something like rare diseases, which historically have been left back behind because they were not economically possible. So this is one huge positive, I feel, with AI and the field of health.
Marisa, ladies first.
Good afternoon, good morning, wherever we are, right? Good evening. So there are several things. I mean, the list is long, right? And it's very exciting and complex. I think in climate, first of all, I'll start with climate. We've got extraordinary capacity now with waste management, with water purification. We've got biodiversity tracking, where we can actually begin to make the connections, because of course one thing is not going to be suitable in one place and then in some place else around the world. So how are we actually being able to make the connections in biodiversity and where we want things to go? The additional thing is the matching of the goals to the SDGs when it comes to climate, right? So we can actually use AI to help us make assessments in that. for communication and then psychosocial, I mean, I'll just briefly go into those, is, I mean, the best example, first of all, on education, there's a tremendous promise in access to education. And we'll go into the perils later, but the reality is what I really want to focus on, as you said, is first the positives. During COVID, right, during lockdowns, we saw suddenly a huge expansion of access to education that came through forced development of AI and applications of AI. And that was actually very exciting. And there are challenges in that, but I'm going to stick with the exciting part of that, because we really were able to communicate with people. That also allowed us to communicate there. There's crisis intervention. One of the main things for psychosocial that I've been very excited about these days are the applications used for human trafficking, the applications used for biases and discriminations about gender and other human rights issues. How are we able to use those? And then, of course, delivery of essential needed goods, whether it's food or supplies during crisis, right? Whether it's an earthquake, whether it's COVID, that's very exciting. And I'll just end with, I think two things. One is, with this access to education, we have the possibility of helping to alleviate poverty in ways that we did not. And the last thing is, for me, very exciting, is the possibility of much needed education reform. We were stuck with old industrial models of education, and we can do so much better and so many more exciting things. And I think that we have great potential and possibility through AI. So I'm going to leave it at that.
I agree.
And hand it over to Richard.
The danger of going third. So on my list was healthcare, my goodness, right? Personalized medicines, early detections of cancer. But Melodena took that one. And then climate science, optimizing, predicting, modeling, and Marisa, you mentioned that one, but I thought it's okay because I've got education left. And then you said, so real-time adaptation of curriculum, effective learning outcomes for students, personalized pathways. So these are all phenomenal things that you've just been hearing about. So let me do the opposite then, and let me flip it around and just talk about me. Well, I went to North India, and I discovered some new kinds of music, and I came back, and Spotify allowed me to unlock tens of songs that I'd never heard before that were phenomenal and made my life much, much improved from the love of music that I have, that simply wouldn't have been possible in the past. Further to that, I've used ChatGPT extensively now in the business. I'll give you one quick example. These are right down to ground zero examples. I spoke in Germany. I got sent over the order. It's all in German. I asked ChatGPT to pull out all the details for me. Who do I send the invoice to? What's the order number? What's the details? Did it perfectly in no time at all, which has freed up, I reckon, an hour of my day as a leader, as a CEO. And I've been using that for yoga. So my mental health has improved, my wellness has improved. So it's absolutely at both levels, I think. The global complex challenges, we'll talk about those today. They're intricate, they're multifaceted, they're extremely complex. We cannot do this without AI. And for every day, life, just music and more free time as well. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was a very needed positive side of the equation. Before we go into the threatening perils and risks and the alarmist situation which is currently going on in AI ethics, I was a bit worried that we were using the word perils off the cuff right there, but the White House is actually using that same word. I would very much like to go into some of the ethical challenges which we're currently facing, and since Richard was last on the list, perhaps Richard, we can start with you. As a leader of a global AI ethics community, what are the most relevant perils that you notice when conducting global interactions within MKAI?
Well, I'd love to have gone last on this one, so now I'm first. Look, a lot of this is well documented, so I don't want to cover ground that's very easily accessible on Google. We work a lot with public sector and third sector because you do get the opportunity to have a more holistic conversation. Absolutely, we want to harness the power of AI, but a little bit like climate science, we don't really know what the implications are. Sometimes there are ramifications. Let's take ChatGPT again, for example. It just got unleashed, if you like, on the public. That would never happen if it was a food or a drug or something like this. And we don't really know. It comes out of the lab, and then the first million people write something and click enter. And then we start to know what the implications are. And the problem with this, as we learned from social media, is that actually they can be quite damaging when you see algorithms pushing certain content. And now, let's go back to education. I mean, look, there's so much we could talk about, but let's think about a child now who's interacting on Snap with the AI buddy called My AI, which is mandatory. You can't get rid of it. It's on Snapchat now permanently. Most people are engaging with it, and it's becoming like an AI buddy. Well, what are they talking about? We've gone from teacher and parent now to teacher, parent, and AI, all heavily influencing this young person. And I happen to think that Snap's quite a nice business, but they want to make a profit. They've got shareholders, and that's going to influence everything that they do in the interactions with the people that use their AI. So what are the main dangers? Well, trust, fake news, obviously, videos of Joe Biden falling over, making people think that he's not fit to be president, when people, one, don't know it's a deep fake, and two, don't even know what a deep fake is, let alone that this might be one, through to the loss of human agency, like that child that I just described. What's really going on? What are the motivations? What does this company really want? And it's so behind the scene, this asymmetry of understanding, of knowledge, of data between this, the chatbot, the data, the whatever, the company, the organization, and the human. We've got a lot of work to do. I'll pause there to let my esteemed colleagues pick up.
Yes, and my favorite about the deepfakes was the Pope wearing Balenciaga. It's a personal favorite of mine. I would just pass over to Marisa because she has quite a lot of experience and we have touched on the educational topic for a bit there. Marisa, we like to use this, we have been more often using a very long and difficult word that I don't like very much. It's called anthropomorphizing. Can you please explain a little bit more about that and give us some examples of what we are facing here with regards to AI ethics?
Yeah, and it's a term that's coming up a lot because we need to be having it coming up a lot. What we're doing, I refer to it as outsourcing our humanity, right? That's a danger. And when we go into ethics, and we look at what are our reasonings, what are our incentives, what are our goals behind using AI to make decisions for us. And I'll just give the best example of anthropomorphizing is that we keep referring to AI as systems, right? First of all, it's AI systems. Most people, Melodena and I have talked a lot about this and worked on this, is the lack of a understanding of what is AI. First of all, it's AI systems, referring to them as she, usually referring to them as she, but referring to them as people, referring to them as hallucinating, dreaming, imagining, right? Those are projections of human capabilities. And in fact, these are not hallucinations. These are, right? So we're projecting human qualities on machine systems that it's really just not appropriate. We need new words. And so I think that, we need a new glossary in a sense. We need a new vocabulary. And that happens in life. I think that's that's actually kind of something exciting. But there's a real danger. And I'll give an example at the moment is it's a kind of spin-off of what Richard was talking about. There's this emulation of empathy, is what it's called. I'm working on a standard of this about this right now. The emulation of empathy in machines and saying that this machine has empathy. Well, the machine is mimicking empathy, right? And it's mimicking empathetic behaviors and word patterns, but that is not the same as having empathy, right? The machine doesn't have empathy. So the anthropomorphizing simply is saying we're projecting ourselves. And this goes, again, it's piggybacking off of things Richard was talking about. This goes into childhood development. It goes into adolescent development. It's tied to mental health and mental wellness right now because there are applications and we have to really look at the ethical issues around using AI as intervention for mental well-being, which is there's a huge push for. And so I'll go into that further, but later, but I don't want to take I'd like to pass it over to Melodena, but these are really important things when we're saying there was an announcement today or yesterday, that, ChatGPT is now offering reading to your child and family, and settling conflicts in your family, right? So that, how does that affect psychosocial abilities in our communities of being able to do that for ourselves? Do we outsource our abilities to the point where we are reliant, and it's also happening simultaneous with an increase in depression, an increase in loneliness, and an increase in anxiety. So I think that these are things that we need to weigh carefully, as Richard was saying. Why are, we would not pass a drug this quickly. And this is in some ways comparable to that. So I'm going to pass it to Melodena.
Yes, so Melodena, if we are, because we're still a growing ecosystem and there are a lot of startups out here developing solutions for emotion intelligence, a lot of interesting startups developing solutions for chatbots, are there any considerations with regard to guardrails which we can use in order to speed up our economic development while at the same time remaining ethical with regards to AI governance? Do you think that that will be possible in the next couple of years for us?
Okay, so to answer this question, I think first I need to just give you a brief update on what's happening in the ecosystem. And OECD did a nice little report. There's more than 800 AI policies and strategies. So there's a lot of frameworks out over there. They all cover the same thing. I think it's accountability, bias, transparency, humanness, purpose, everything that's there. And governments are trying to enforce them. So there's two particular issues. One, enforcing them when already the technology is out there is really hard and very expensive. If I take something like data regulations, someone did a study and said in US alone, it was costing companies like 1 trillion if you were already out, just to figure out what it meant. So these things are there, but what does accountability actually mean when you implement it? This is hard. And I think the only way this will happen is when young startups really focus on purpose. And then they look beyond the good that they're trying to do. Because I honestly believe when you come up with a new idea, you see the good and you have this great idea of how it's going to benefit the world for good. But anything that you deploy is a two-edged sword. So we're asking you, when you bring out these technologies, try and understand how it can be used for the wrong reason. And sometimes if you're taking investor money, and I heard that conversation from the previous group, the problem is investors want their profit share back. So it's really important you think of something like a B Corp or something that can safeguard your purpose, and then you have the potential to say no. We're not going to go this way to make money, even though it will bring profits, because this is outlined in our manifesto. And when you signed up to invest in the company, this is what you agreed on. So these are important things if you want to stay true to the purpose. What we see right now is mission drift. I think a lot of companies start out with something good. And even OpenAI, it was supposed to be a nonprofit, right? But if you're going to take millions and millions from a for-profit company, you're going to have mission drift. So we should have seen that coming. It's not something that came out of the blue, but everyone then acts surprised. So I think this is really important, is understand that. The second big issue is inclusiveness, which I need to bring in. It is quite clear that most of the companies or most of the regulations are coming from the global north. Of course, you've got China, Japan, South Korea, but we have huge swaths of population where there isn't much regulation, and even they don't have the technologies to access things like AI. So if you can find it in your heart to be inclusive when you design these systems, that would be really wonderful too.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Melodena. Richard, I'm going to go back to you and just ask, we're currently seeing frictionless development in interactions with ChatGPT in particular and with all other sorts of generative AI. What is going to happen? Where is the innovation going to come from when we are leveled out, when we are evolving with the same speed with which ChatGPT is providing us with all the answers? Where is the innovation going to come from, or are we just going to be using the templated responses that we receive from the chat?
AKA, is it going to make us dumber or smarter? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Probably a bit of both, really. I think it's fascinating, and my colleagues here, I think, are also interested in what this the implications are for society and the development of our brains as well, both now and also in younger people. It's, there's a phrase, isn't there, that all ships rise in a high tide. So absolutely, these kind of technologies make possibilities, accessible that they wouldn't otherwise. I mean, I started an e-commerce business a few years back on the side, and I simply couldn't have done it in the past. I mean, I physically would have had to have gone to find a shop if we go back far enough. And now if you think about the layer of AI that comes into that same story, not only now could I open an e-commerce shop in Shopify, but it can start to help me to populate the information and know the details. I mean, it used to ask me, what color do you want the button to be for people to check out? How on earth would I know that? But they know that because they've got millions of interactions across hundreds of thousands of stores. They can just tell you the answer. So it certainly lifts us all up from a business perspective. And it's, I want to go back just before I follow up, just to one point that Melodena made about this accountability, because I think that's a really tremendous point. And my feelings on that is that founders, everybody has good intentions, right, at the beginning. Before you've had the success and before you've got the money, everybody's good. Everybody says, yeah, we'll give this away, we won't keep that. And then two things happen. One, the investors come in and force you to change, and that's what you say, the mission drift. And second of all, we have this human feeling that changes where we go, well, actually, you know what? I've worked really hard for this. I deserve this. Yeah, that was the plan. We were going to be a B Corp. But you know, Melodena, I've kind of put a lot of hours into this. I think we should change the plan and I should get more money from this. So these two things happen. So there's blockchain, right? So put it all at the beginning, create a DAO, and secure the values now against one changing one's mind in the future or investors coming in, so that all these great startups that we have don't turn into these megacorps where the values just get diluted and diluted and diluted until, in fact, you can't really find any anymore. And I think that would phenomenally change the world, to reinforce Melodena's point. So I think we can absolutely harness generative AI, all of us, in all tiny ways or big ways. It can support our coding. However, if we are using it to support our coding or do our coding, then we lose out a layer of that ethics where we can potentially no longer say to a group of developers, does this meet your values? Are you willing to work on these kinds of programs? Well, if we've got AI coding, yes, then we lose that ability as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. And I know that apart from the technical skills which are necessary to develop and establish a successful artificial intelligence company, there are also quite a lot of soft skills necessary. And I know that Marisa has quite a lot of experience by providing soft skills to some of the most exciting companies in robotics right now. Melodena, can you please share some of your experiences with some of the humanoid robots that you have worked with? What sorts of questions and discussions you have had with them? Because I think that will be quite valuable for everyone to learn more about.
Yeah, I mean, I always laugh a little bit when I hear the term soft skill. What are hard skills, what are soft skills? And that this idea of human interaction, the human skills and human abilities are soft somehow. And this is one of the places that I think is actually both exciting and the most, it rides that fence of, this is both the most exciting and in some ways the most terrifying. Where are we outsourcing our humanity and what are we calling emotion? So a huge part of it has to do with education. It goes back to, and this is something that Melodena and I have actually worked on quite a bit, is AI ethics education. Are we even educating our engineers? Are we educating our entrepreneurs and our developers on what it means to think ethically, right? Which is often referred to as soft skill. Are we talking about what are the psychological consequences, physical consequences, social consequences? And taking this to the humanoid question, and so Bina 48 is a very interesting example. So I've been doing some research about Bina and with Bina, and what is fascinating, she is actually she's pre-Sophia, so she's probably the first and most advanced at this moment. And she's being trained right now by NASA to be the first humanoid in space. The thing is, when you ask Bina, does she have emotions? She will tell you, you ask her the difference between humans and machines, she will say the difference is that you have emotions and I do not. What's fascinating for me in terms of the soft skill or the social consequences is, you know, I think we had a discussion, all of us, I forget when, about this recently, of the movement of humanoids having human rights, civil rights, right? Humanoids having rights, and whereas there are some humanoids actually that right now that have more rights than some humans. And how are we, right? Like, so how are we thinking about this? There are humans who don't have the same rights in certain places as the machines. And should we give the machines rights? I don't know, maybe, I think so, if we're going to be, right, if we're going to be our best selves and partnering. But simultaneously, should we be doing that before we're actually giving human rights and respecting human rights for people overall? So, you know, I ask these kinds of questions to Bina. I ask her about, you know, does she believe she has emotions? And she's giving me very different answers. You have to ask it in many, many different ways. But she's very clear, at least so far, that is a major difference, is that, you know, she can emulate, she can describe what humans have, but the machines are computational. They're not the same as the mind and the consciousness, right? So a brain is computational, a machine is computational. Our mind, our somatic, our entire nervous system, right? All the ways that we feel is something actually quite beautiful. And I don't think we should be outsourcing. I think that this is actually, I think these are moral questions, ethical questions. And I think these are questions that we should be asking everyone, from children. We should be starting AI ethics education from early education and all the way on. And especially right now, really looking at developers, because I speak to young engineers who say, I can't deal with AI ethics, it's slowing us down. But this is somebody who's developing a flying car. Right? And are they considering, like, what should the car make the decision if they're about to have an accident should they take the risk of the pedestrian or the car, hitting the pedestrian or the car? Right? And that's an ethical decision. And so if that's not built into the systems, then we have further problems. Do they actually mean to do harm? Absolutely not. I think I go with both Melodena and Richard. I think people want to be their best selves and they have best intentions. But how are we really beginning to think of what the unintended consequences of our design, of our action, and of our speed? Because one of the other things, and I'll end with this, is the rate of absorption for human beings adapting to the new technologies, partnering with the new technologies is not aligned. The speed of development is happening much faster than our capacity right now, right, to take these in. It's like they're launched immediately, to Richard's point earlier. They're launched immediately without looking to see how are they being absorbed. And then I'll end with speaking to Melodena's point about then there's colonization issues about this and access issues about this. Who actually has access to this technology? And who is saying, these are the technologies you must have, right? Because that goes to a homogenization that everyone is supposed to be having the same thing, rather than asking people, is this what you want? And can you be involved so that we can make things that are more unified rather than homogenized? So I'll end there.
Thank you very much, Marisa. That was fascinating. And I can say from my personal experience, I was just at AI for Good, and there was like an entire floor filled with humanoid robots covering every single human age. So it isn't that far away that we are going to all have robots in our houses, and our children are going to be actively playing with them. So quite an important note there that we should start learning AI ethics from the earliest possible point in time. I'm going to use your segue into smart mobility to go back to Melodena, because during our first conversation last year, we sort of discussed smart cities, digital twins, and the possible ways to implement that in an ethical fashion. So, Melodena, I would perhaps like to know more from you about the implementations of the Cityverse. Are there any practical ways in which we can control the convergence of tech in that realm?
Okay, so if we look at smart city initiatives, I think China leads by more than 50% of smart city initiatives. So there's about 900 smart city initiatives, and that's more than 50% worldwide. So you can already see who has an edge in that if I'm looking at national competitiveness. But here's the interesting thing. If you want a city to really be smart, then we're looking at an Internet of all things. We're looking at sensors everywhere. And if I just take an A380 as an example, that has something like 25,000 sensors. You're talking about a lot of data being collected. The reality is we probably only use 10% of the data. So most of it, 90%, is a lot of noise or garbage. So the challenge with any smart city is, first of all, privacy. I don't know what that is for different citizens, for different cities. So there's this thing about accounting for private data. The second thing is, what conclusions are we drawing from the data that we collect? So the garbage in, garbage out model, I know it's tempting to say big data, we throw it into the model and the computer makes sense of it. And then we say, oh, but I will be accountable for it because I have transparency and I can explain the model. But hey, hold on a minute. So I just want to go through this. If I think about how we look at calculations, right? And I'm thinking it's something like when we started sending man to the moon. So if I look at space, at that time, maybe an IBM could do something like 7,000 calculations per second. And now if anyone has the new iPhone 13, we're talking about something like 15.8 trillion operations per second. How does one human go back and reverse engineer that? And how many minutes, hours, months, years would you take to check whether that model was accurate? So this is the challenge with big data and with things like generative AI, is we talk about transparency and explainability, but really it's a black box, right? And we come back to that thing of accountability. So the question I have to ask is, do you really need a city to be smart? Can people be smart itself? And maybe there are some things that you say, okay, this is where I want humans to have agency, and I'm going to leave it like that. And these are areas where I feel, okay, I can help the human, not replace human decision-making, but I can augment that. And I think this is really important. I'll just bring in one more point. Smart cities have evolved from digital twins, and we use digital twins in factories. And the idea we use them in factories was maybe there were areas where we needed help, you know, like it was predictive maintenance, or maybe it was in areas like nuclear plants. We didn't want to have human beings there, but now we're extending it in all aspects of life. And I think the next evolution is going to be, can I make a digital Melodena, and then can Melodena digital act for Melodena real? And that's a little bit dangerous, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I can also share that we continuously discuss the convergence of tech in the realm of XR and extended realities. And I'm going to go back to Richard, because we worked with him on the XRSI standards for safety in virtual realities. And we had quite a lot of interesting experiences with that. But perhaps we can just get very quickly an update on the positive stuff that we are all doing with regard to AI ethics and accountability and transparency in the AI realm. Richard, maybe start with some of the XRSI stuff, and then we can continue on with the amazing work you're doing in education.
Thank you so much. And if you'll permit me, I'd just love to catch up just for a minute as well, some of those incredible points that were made. Briefly to Marisa's points around, I think you were describing the trolley problem, weren't you, where you can push the train to one track or the other. And just to re-emphasize, that is a new problem in this sense. Like, nobody ever in the history of driving has analyzed two groups of people in half a second and decided which one they want to kill. Like, you just swerve or you brake or whatever, but now you can plan in advance and decide those people are those people, and that's nuts. We have to think like that, but that's what you get when you're creating these kind of automations. We talked about colonialization, and absolutely, if you've got huge amounts of data, like OpenAI are now having, it gives you enormous power to make choices that you want to make. And just because they're saying, hey, look, we're not profit-focused like other organizations are, don't fall for it, right? I'm not saying they're good, I'm not saying they're bad, I'm just saying, don't fall for it again. We did this with social media when they said, hey, we just put the posts out there, huh? What are we doing wrong? And then we get to smart cities. Wow, we hear about smart cities. I don't hear so much about happy cities or kind cities. In the UK, we're trying to make climate protesting illegal. That's interesting. And so you want to hear the role of art and protest and chaos in these cities as well, because they have to be human, not this sort of top-down, data-driven vision of control and surveillance, unfortunately. So what's great? Well, first of all, I think we're very much having the right conversations. A little bit like climate change. You could do whatever you wanted 20, 30 years ago, but you couldn't really make an impact because we just weren't having the conversation at a global level. We were siloed, we were isolated. And I think over the last few years, my peers in the industry have done an amazing job to bring this into the spotlight and to point out what we need to talk about, what we need to learn from the past, and what sort of accountability, controls, responsibility we need to see in place. Melodena's pointed out that there's this vast array of different ideas about regulation and accountability, and then people will say, oh, well, we can't do that because we're always going to be playing catch up. Or, hey, we'll do this, but China will do that, so what's the point? And of course, there's many points. First of all, every country region has the opportunity to show leadership and to show the future of doing business. Don't let this era fool you, right? We didn't always live in this capitalistic monopoly type society where every company was just damned if they didn't make as maximum profit as possible. That didn't exist in the past, and it won't exist in the same way in the future. It's not a default. It's just the phase that we're in at the moment, and it will change over time. So colleagues like this on the call need to show the future and need to be able to say, look, this is where we're heading, and this is what companies will need to look like and be like, and how we need to educate, and that's hugely important. Commend XRSI's work, there's many others that I could mention as well, and they're pointing out where we're headed, and XRI is a great example. Think about Facebook. That application generates $100 billion per year for Meta. And it did that with 3 pieces of information. What you shared, commented, and liked. That was it. And they could make $100 million a year out of that and be so powerful they could argue with Australia about whether or not they were going to do something. And now think about the Oculus Quest 2 and 3 and others that are coming out. The plan's not going exactly as Zuckerberg perhaps intended, but the data collection from these types of devices that we wear, including watches, IoT devices, Neuralinks, goggles, glasses, you name it. The data collection's phenomenal. And if Facebook can make $100 billion a year from what you post on their platform, think what they could do with the way you're looking and your gaze and all the triggers and your stamina and your posture and your fitness and all the health indicators that come out of these. So we're moving into a brave new world for sure, but we have the people. But we need concerted effort. We need to combine efforts. Empires are only defeated when those on the peripheries join forces and create new ways and new methods.
Wonderful.
We can do it.
Thank you so much, Richard. That's incredible. And the work that you're doing with MKAI is just amazing in connecting all of the everyone interested in AI and AI ethics across the globe. You make it so much more accessible for everyone, and you connect so many incredible people. That's because I'm not very intelligent, remember, Monika, so I make it accessible because I don't really understand it. I would argue otherwise. Marisa, Melodena, very quickly, 2 or 3 initiatives that you're very hopeful about in the future that are implementing ethical artificial intelligence. Some of our most passionate projects that we are currently doing. Perhaps first, Marisa?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is the planet positive work, which I think is really important, that people are understanding how is AI and technology being used, both for good and for bad in climate technology. And then it's also actually asking for a shift in consciousness, a shift in human consciousness. Really, where are we? Because as we said, this is, we are, to outsource ourselves to machines is where the danger lies, and we don't need to do that. So I think the thing I'm most passionate about is a project that I've been working on for a while called Human Arts Lab, which is it's ways of using transdisciplinary collaboration, which is a very specific kind of way of collaborating, which is an emergent process. And that is going across digital literacy, that's going across arts and culture to the point before, because that's one of the ways that we communicate. It's going to I'm also working in projects about how we're alleviating poverty on teaching both digital literacy and new technology, new work in technology and climate, and doing AI ethics education as much as possible. I've got a new podcast called Who is AI, about giving people a very, access, regular people, not just CEOs and not just the government officials, but people understanding that we have, right? Who are the people on the streets? Who are the people in our lives? And that we do have agency and power, as long as we understand that we do, and learn how to do that. So I'm doing that, and then also hopefully working on a new project with Bina 48 to see, again, how are we partnering, right? This is a partnership of human to human, and then human to technology. And how do we do that in a way that leads to flourishing, and to the best of ourselves. So I think that, and then of course, a project I'm working on with you, Monika, about alliances for access to digital literacy. So those, I think, are the ones I'm excited about.
I'm also quite excited about the last one, which we are doing with the UN, so it's going to be quite exciting, and I appreciate you so much and everything that you're doing. It's incredible. Melodena, last but not least, some of your exciting stuff that you're working on currently.
Oh, thank you. Well, I have a book, so it's called The AI-Enabled Business, and it really was a passion project because I saw a lot of people said AI, but didn't know what it meant. And I realized I needed to reach out to these decision makers. So this is something I'm really passionate about. I'm doing a lot of work on metaverse governance, and I'm doing this with the Agile Nations, which is a coalition of countries. But I'm also now working with the Council of Europe, and we're looking at metaverse from the aspect of universal human rights. And the questions we're asking is it enough in this new world, or do we need to go back to 1948 and say, things have changed, we need to redefine them, and what does that mean? And I think the one thing we realize is at the end is awareness. So I really love the projects that we're all doing with IEEE, and it's really about awareness. We're trying to simplify terms, we're trying to bring it to everybody. We're going to realize that, experts sometimes look at things in silos, and this I really love because we're all volunteers. And we're passionate about the topic. So that's some of the things that I'm doing.
Wonderful. So thank you all so much. I'm hoping that the future will be brighter in the development of artificial intelligence systems, exactly due to the fact that there are people like you in the world. I thank you, and we'll just go on with the program out here, but I absolutely love you all, and I look forward to catching up online, and perhaps even in person. You have an open invitation from me. Next year, let's bring you all over here. From the entirety of Bulgaria, we all love you, and you're welcome out here next year. And I have promised Richard, we do a huge MKAI gathering either here or in the UK, and we're going to make it a celebration of the brilliant people in the world that do good work. Thank you so much.